You're not our son, you're our sponsor. Mom laughed after I sent $28,000 for their bills. I snapped, then pay for your own damn life. I canceled Bella's car insurance, took their BMW, and demanded $82,000 back. Now they're crying, screaming, and begging me to come back. But I'm not their wallet anymore. Hey, Reddit. You ever feel like you were born just to be someone else's retirement plan? That thought hit me like a freight train as I sat in my one-bedroom apartment in Chicago staring at my bank account. A number that had dropped by $28,000 overnight. Not for a mortgage, not for medical bills, not for me, but for my parents. Again, I didn't even get a thank you this time. Just a screenshot of their zeroed-out credit card balances and a winking emoji from Mom. I'm 29, single, work in corporate IT grinding 60-hour weeks. No kids, no wild spending. Just me, my overpriced rent, and this weird sense of guilt I've been carrying since I was 19 and left home with 2 duffel bags and a scholarship. Back then, Mom told me, if you walk out don't expect to come crawling back, and I didn't. I built everything on my own. So how did I end up here again? It started 2 years ago when Dad lost his job. Turns out he quit because his boss asked him to show up on time. Mom had a part-time gig doing nails from home, but she'd slowed down for health reasons, which I now know meant she preferred watching true crime marathons on YouTube. They called me one night in tears, said they couldn't make rent. I wired them $3,000 without blinking. That was the beginning. They said they'd pay me back. They didn't. But I kept sending more $400 for groceries here, $800 for car repairs there, $5,000 when they said Bella, my 21-year-old sister, needed tuition money. Only she wasn't in school. She was in Tulum, drinking cocktails and tagging me in bikini pics with captions like #BlessLife. I should have cut them off then, but I couldn't. Guilt is a hell of a drug, and my mom knows exactly how to push the right buttons after everything we gave up for you. After raising you with nothing, which to be fair was kind of true. But 2 weeks ago, the switch finally flipped. I flew home for the weekend to surprise them. I hadn't seen them in almost a year. I brought gifts, nice ones, a bottle of Macallan for Dad, a spa certificate for Mom, and a new MacBook for Bella. Even though she had blocked me 6 months ago after I refused to co-sign a lease for her, they weren't home when I arrived. The house was nicer than I remembered. Newly painted, a pool. Granite countertops that definitely weren't there growing up. And parked out front, a shiny black BMW. I thought maybe they were borrowing it or renting. No. It was theirs. I waited 3 hours. When they finally walked in, they looked stunned. Not excited to see me. Oh, Mom said, setting down her purse. Why didn't you tell us you were coming? Wanted to surprise you. I smiled. Guess it worked. Bella walked in behind them, keys to the BMW dangling in her hand. She looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet. Are you staying long? She asked, voice cold. That night, I sat with them at the dinner table. A table I bought, by the way, and asked them how they could afford all this when they told me they were months behind on utilities. And that's when Mom laughed. Not nervously. Not in embarrassment. She laughed loud, wheezy. Full-on belly laughter. Oh, honey. She said between giggles. You're not our son anymore. You're our sponsor. My jaw clenched. I looked at Dad. He was grinning like it was the best joke he'd heard all year. Come on. You know we appreciate you. He said. But you make so much money. What's the harm in helping out a little? A little. I snapped. I've sent you over $60,000 in the last 2 years. 72 actually, Bella chimed in. Not counting the Apple stuff. And you bought a BMW. I asked, voice shaking. Bella's mom said proudly. She deserves something nice after her accident. What accident? She shrugged. Well, not an accident, piracy. More like a bad week. That was it. I stood up and walked outside. The air was cold. My hands were shaking. I called my bank, froze the card they had access to. Then I called the insurance company, canceled Bella's coverage. She wasn't even listed as a legal driver. Then I walked back inside, grabbed the spare keys from the kitchen drawer, and took the BMW. They came running out like I was robbing them. "You can't do this," Mom screamed. "That's Bella's." "No," I said, sliding into the driver's seat. "That's mine. You paid for it with my money. You want a car? Pay for it yourself." Bella threw her shoe at the window as I backed out. It bounced off the hood. I drove off without another word. That night, I sat in the BMW in a hotel parking lot, staring at the leather seats, the glowing dash, the little scented pine tree hanging from the mirror. I thought of all the birthdays I spent alone, all the times I bailed them out, hoping for a hug or even just some honest gratitude. Instead, I got laughed at, called a sponsor. That was a week ago. Since then, I've sent them an itemized spreadsheet of every transfer I've ever made. It totals $82,140.67. I told them I want it back in full. No payment, no communication. They've texted, called, left voicemails. Bella even emailed me pretending to be her lawyer. But I'm done. I may have been their sponsor once, but I'm not their fool anymore. The first text came the next morning. "We didn't mean it like that. You're being dramatic. Call me." I didn't. I spent the day test driving my new old BMW down Lakeshore Drive. The windows down, music loud, and not a single shred of guilt in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom, but that feeling didn't last. By noon, I had 37 missed calls. Mom, Dad, Bella, even some unknown numbers I suspected were cousins roped into the chaos. Then came the voicemail. It was Dad. "Son, this is getting out of hand. You stole Bella's car. We can't survive without it. Your mother is crying. She hasn't slept. This is elder abuse, for God's sake." Elder abuse. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I played it again and again. And each time, my chest got tighter. Because beneath the anger, there was still that kid in me who wanted to be accepted, loved, thanked. Anything other than used. I called my therapist that afternoon. Someone I hadn't seen in nearly a year. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. Just took notes, nodded, and finally said, "You were never a son to them. You were an investment they expected a return on." Those words hit harder than I expected because they were true. I had one goal now: reclaim my power. So I started digging, pulled bank records, found 3 credit cards they'd opened under my name back in February 2018. That added up to another $9,000 in debt. I contacted the banks, froze the accounts, and started a fraud claim. They must have gotten notified because I received a panicked email from Mom with the subject line, "We're sorry." It was empty. No text, just the subject line. That's what remorse looked like in my family. A desperate Hail Mary when the gravy train derailed. Then Bella posted on Instagram, a black screen with the caption, "Some people are snakes. Even blood don't matter when greed takes over." I didn't reply, but others did: mutual friends, old high school classmates, some distant relatives. And suddenly, my DMs were filling up with messages like, "Hey, man, saw Bella's post. What happened? You okay? Did you really steal a car?" So I posted my own story. No names. Just cold, hard numbers. $82,140.67 sent. 3 credit cards opened in my name. A BMW bought without my knowledge. I've been more than generous. I've been a fool. No more. That post blew up. It wasn't meant to, but it did. By the end of the day, dozens of people, including family, unfollowed Bella. Some even reached out to apologize. My cousin Tyler, who I hadn't spoken to in years, called me out of nowhere. "Dude," he said, "I always thought something was off with them. Mom said they borrowed money from her too, never paid it back. Good for you." I was stunned. I wasn't alone. That night, I made a decision. I would no longer just walk away. I was gonna force them to face what they'd done. I hired a lawyer. I drafted a formal demand for repayment. Not because I expected to get the money, but because I wanted them to see this wasn't just an emotional tantrum. This was business now. When the letter hit their mailbox, the screaming started. First, it was voicemails. Bella crying, cursing me out, telling me she lost her job because she couldn't get to work. Then Dad texted me. "Dad, you always said family comes first." Guess that was a lie. So I responded me, "You were right. Family does come first. I just stopped considering you mine." Block. 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 I changed my number. Shut down the joint credit alerts. Rerouted any mail connected to them. I even swapped out my emergency contact at work. From Dad to my best friend, Marcus. That was a moment that felt oddly significant. Like I was finally officially cutting the cord. A week passed, then 2. I started sleeping better, cooking real meals, went to a local event without checking my phone every 5 minutes in case Bella needed something. I even met someone, Alyssa, a nurse with a dry sense of humor and a low tolerance for BS. I told her everything on our 3rd date. Expected her to flinch or at least pull back. She didn't. Instead, she leaned in and said, "Damn. That's some next-level manipulation. I'm glad you got out." And just like that, I realized I really was out until I wasn't. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. A handwritten note from my mother. "No dear. No love." Just 5 shaky words scrawled across lined paper. "We need you. Please stop." No apology. No ownership. Just a request to undo the damage of their own making. Should have made me feel powerful. Instead, it made me furious because even now, especially now, they still thought I was the one hurting them. That I had some obligation to sweep it all under the rug and go back to bleeding for their comfort. But I was done being the band-aid over their self-inflicted wounds. I folded the letter and burned it in my sink. Let them scream. Let them beg. Let them cry. I'd heard it all before. Only this time I wasn't listening. The moment I burned that letter, it felt like something inside me burned away with it. The last remnants of guilt, of duty, of the twisted sense of loyalty that had kept me chained to a family that never saw me as a son, only a source. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I wanted closure, and not the kind where I walk away in silence while they play the victim. No. I wanted the kind that leaves scars. The kind that exposes everything. So I did what I should have done years ago. I told the truth. I wrote a long post, not for sympathy, not for attention, just for the record. The full story, the $28,000 lump sum, the BMW, the insurance I paid for Bella after she totaled 2 used cars, the tuition lie, the credit cards in my name, the sponsor comment. I posted screenshots, redacted numbers, but undeniable proof, dates, transfers, emails, and then I hit publish. I didn't expect the explosion that followed. Old neighbors commented, "This explains so much." An ex-teacher of Bella said she remembered how entitled she was, how Mom bragged about getting rich through her kids. Even my own aunt, Mom's sister, messaged me privately to say she'd lent them nearly $10,000 for medical expenses that clearly never existed. But the most surprising message came from a woman I didn't know, Linda Farrow. She wrote, "I was your father's supervisor at Blackridge Steel. He didn't quit. He was fired for stealing from the company fund. I always wondered what happened after that." I sat there stunned, reading the message over and over. They hadn't just bled me dry. They'd been burning every bridge behind them for years, and I was the last one standing until I wasn't. With everything public, their world began to shrink. Bella's social media went dark. Friends unfollowed her in droves. She deleted her Instagram entirely after someone posted a comment calling her daddy's little scammer. My parents, they were suddenly ghosts. No calls, no letters, no emails, just silence. But I wasn't fooled. They were regrouping. I soon found out how. I got a letter from a lawyer, not mine, claiming emotional distress due to my libelous public accusations. They wanted me to take the post down, apologize publicly, and pay them $10,000 in damages. I laughed so hard I cried. Then I handed it to my attorney, who responded with a detailed breakdown of the $91,000 plus I was still owed, copies of fraudulent credit applications, and a promise that we were preparing to press charges for identity theft, wire fraud, and harassment. That shut them up. Weeks passed. And then one day, I came home to a large envelope duct taped to my apartment door. Inside was a handwritten note. Mom's handwriting again. "You've made your point. We're ruined. Bella's working nights at a warehouse. Your father had a panic attack. I can't sleep. We can't pay it back, but we get it. You won. Happy now." There was no return address. No apology. Just one more manipulative backhanded plea trying to guilt me into silence with their suffering, but it was too late. See, I had already won. Not because I got the money back. I didn't and probably never will. I won because I told the truth. Because I stopped bleeding for people who'd never offer me a bandage. Because I burned the bridge they built out of lies and gaslighting and called it love. But here's the kicker, and maybe the part I'm not proud of. I mailed them one last package. Inside, a check for $1 written out to the sponsor along with a sticky note that read, "Here's your final installment. Good luck funding the rest of your lives." It wasn't about money anymore. It was about ending the cycle, about walking away with my head high, my spine straight, and my heart finally clean of their poison. They still text, still call from burner numbers. I don't answer. They left me with nothing but trauma. But I left them with something worse. A world that finally sees them for who they are. And that, I've learned, is priceless. And now, they're left with nothing but silence. No money, no lies to hide behind, and no more sponsor to bleed. Let me know in the comments. Would you have gone even further?